I remember the exact moment I knew my marriage was over. Not the moment I suspected, or the moment I confronted her. Those came later. But the split second when something inside me quietly snapped, and a cold, clear voice in my head said, "This is the end." It was a Wednesday evening in early autumn. I had gotten home around 7 p.m. after a long day at the engineering firm where I've worked for the last 10 years. My wife, Amanda, was in the kitchen chopping vegetables, the aroma of garlic and roast chicken filling our suburban Ohio home. It smelled like comfort, like the kind of home-cooked meal she used to make when we were a happier family. Our daughter, Emily, was upstairs doing homework, her music faintly thumping through the ceiling. On the surface, it was a normal, peaceful night in our lives. But I had sensed something off for weeks. It was little things at first. The way Amanda started smiling at her phone screen and tilting it away when I walked into the room. Or how she'd been working late more often than not, coming home with flushed cheeks and a jumpy energy that didn't match someone exhausted from overtime. We'd been married 15 years, and I thought I knew all her expressions, but these new ones, I didn't recognize. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling. I told myself we were just in a rut. I was 40 and busy with work. She was 38 and juggling a marketing job and motherhood. We had a teenager causing the usual chaos, bills to pay, aging parents to worry about. Intimacy had become an occasional perfunctory encounter, if that. I chalked it up to midlife stress. Maybe I wasn't as attentive or romantic as I had been. Maybe I was the problem. That night, as we sat down to dinner, I watched her pick at her chicken marsala and avoid eye contact. Emily chattered about school, a math test, drama club tryouts, and I nodded along, but my attention kept drifting to my wife. She seemed a million miles away, chewing slowly, staring down at her plate. When I asked if everything was okay, she startled a little. "Just tired," she said, giving me a quick, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Work was crazy today." "Another campaign launch?" I asked. Her job at a boutique advertising firm often had intense periods. "Mm-hmm," she murmured. She didn't elaborate. Instead, she asked our daughter about school and gave all the right maternal responses. But I noticed she barely touched her food, and her leg bounced under the table. A nervous habit. After dinner, she excused herself, saying she had a headache and was going to lie down. I cleared the dishes, and Emily headed upstairs to shower. I was worried about Amanda, or at least I wanted to worry that something was wrong with her, not between us. I wiped down the counter, trying to quell the gnawing anxiety. On the surface, nothing was obviously wrong. We hadn't had a screaming fight or anything dramatic, but the distance between us had been widening for months, like an invisible wall slowly rising. I could feel her slipping away, and I couldn't figure out how to pull her back. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message from my old college buddy Jason. I glanced at it. Jason. "Hey man, saw you, or thought I saw you, at Bistro Giovanni at lunch today." I waved, but maybe it wasn't you. Bistro Giovanni. I hadn't been there in at least a year. Certainly not today. I ate a sad desk salad at work for lunch, as usual. A prickling sensation crept up my neck. If Jason thought he saw me there, who did he actually see? I texted back, trying to sound casual. "Wasn't me. Long day at the office. Why, you see my evil twin misbehaving." I added a laughing emoji to sell the joke, though my heart had begun to pound. He responded almost immediately. "Ha ha, must have been. Just thought I saw someone who looked like you with a woman at the corner booth. Looked kinda like Amanda from behind too, but I only caught a glimpse." I stared at the message, a sick, heavy feeling settling in my gut. Jason's a jokester, But he had no reason to make this up. He must have seen someone. Two people who looked like me and my wife at an Italian restaurant in downtown Columbus, in the middle of a workday. Amanda does sometimes do client lunches for her marketing job, but she hadn't mentioned any lunch meeting today, and I certainly wasn't there. My hands felt cold. I managed to type back, "Weird coincidence. We're not interesting enough to have doppelgangers, ha." He just replied, "LOL, no kidding, right? Well, hope you're doing well. Grab a beer sometime." I agreed automatically and put my phone down, mind racing. Could it have been Amanda at that restaurant? Bistro Giovanni was a little upscale for a casual lunch. It was the sort of place people go for special occasions or romantic dates. I tried to recall if Amanda had said anything about her day that morning or yesterday. We had barely talked. Morning in our house is a chaotic rush of coffee, cereal, and getting Emily to school. Amanda usually left for work around 8:30 after I did. She hadn't mentioned a lunch out, but that wasn't definitive. Sometimes her team did client schmoozing. Yet wouldn't she have told me if it was at a nice place like Giovanni? Or perhaps not. Lately, she shared less and less about her work. I stood there in the kitchen, the refrigerator's hum suddenly very loud in the silence, and felt the first real seed of suspicion take root. My mind conjured the image. My wife laughing softly over a midday glass of wine at a quiet corner booth, leaning in with that coy smile she used to give me years ago. And across from her, not me, but some other man. I shut my eyes. It could have been an innocent lunch with a coworker or client, I told myself. Jason admitted he only caught a glimpse and wasn't sure. It might not have been her at all. Columbus is a city of nearly 1 million. Plenty of women have brown hair and her build. Plenty of guys look like me from a distance. I should just ask her, I thought. Right now. March upstairs, gently say, "Hey, honey, were you at Bistro Giovanni today? Jason thought he saw us there. Funny, huh?" If it was nothing, she'd laugh it off and clarify. If it was something, well, I'd see it in her face. I took a step toward the hallway, then stopped. I didn't want to believe that my wife, my Amanda, would ever betray me. But something held me back from confronting her right away. Fear, maybe. Or the instinct that once I opened that door, there was no going back. Instead, I quietly climbed the stairs and peeked into our darkened bedroom. She was lying on her side, facing away, the blue glow of her phone screen visible over her shoulder. Not so much sleeping off a headache, it seemed, as distracting herself, possibly texting. For a moment, anger flared in me. Why lie about something so small as having a headache if she just wanted some alone time on her phone? But then again, maybe she did have a headache and just couldn't sleep. I stood there, watching the subtle movements of her arm as she scrolled or typed. A pit formed in my stomach. If she was messaging someone she shouldn't, it could very well be right now, thinking I was busy downstairs. I stepped away silently and retreated to the living room, my chest tight. I knew I wasn't going to sleep that night without answers. If I couldn't outright ask, I needed another way to quell the tormenting questions buzzing in my skull. Around 11 p.m., after everyone else was in bed, I sat at my desk in the small study down the hall, staring at our wireless phone bill online. My breath caught as the itemized list loaded. One number, not saved in our contacts, appeared over and over, dozens of times in the last few weeks. Many were short calls or texts during the day, perhaps innocuous. But a few were longer, late-night calls lasting 20, 30 minutes. And I knew damn well she wasn't on the phone with me at those hours. The number was unfamiliar. It had a local area code. My pulse thudding in my ears, I picked up my cell and dialed it using *67 to block my caller ID. It rang 3 times. Then a male voice answered, wary and deep. "Hello?" I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just listened. In the background of the call, I heard indistinct chatter, a TV, people, as if he was at home. "Hello?" he repeated. Then, "Mandy, is that you?" I hung up so fast my hand fumbled the phone. Mandy. Only a few people ever called her that. I sure as hell wasn't one of them. She hated that nickname. I sat there in the dark study, heart hammering. The pieces were coming together, and I wanted desperately to shove them apart, back into jumbled senselessness. But I wasn't a stupid man. That voice on the phone had sounded roughly our age or older. And he expected the caller to be Mandy. I closed my eyes and let the truth crash over me in a cold wave. My wife was having an affair. There it was, ugly, stark, like a bone breaking through skin. My stomach churned. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself and drew a few slow breaths, trying not to lose my dinner. I felt a burning behind my eyes and realized tears had begun to form. Part of me wanted to go shake her awake and demand an explanation, to scream and cry and collapse. But another part of me, an emerging, dark, steely part, went very, very still. I stood and quietly closed the study door. Then I sat back down and clicked on a reverse lookup site for phone numbers, hands trembling only slightly now. It cost $4.99 for a one-time report, and I paid without hesitation. Within a minute, I had a name, Thomas Caldwell, along with an address in a nearby upscale suburb. Thomas Caldwell. Tom. I recognized the name immediately, and my blood ran hot. Tom was the VP of accounts at Amanda's firm. I'd met him briefly at a company Christmas party 2 years ago. Early 40s, charming smile, a little too much cologne. Married, with 2 young kids, if I recalled correctly from small talk. I remembered him because he was her boss's boss, and he'd been very friendly with her at that party, complimenting her work on some campaign. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it beyond a twinge of professional jealousy. He was the kind of confident executive I wasn't. Now all the little details I had overlooked came flooding back. The sudden uptick in late evenings at work for her, claiming big projects. The new lace underwear set I found stuffed in the back of her drawer that she said she bought for herself, but which I'd never seen her wear for me. The way she'd started locking her phone with a new password a few months ago. The distance, the excuses. I felt something inside me break, but not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't an outpouring of sorrow or a blaze of hot rage. That would come later, maybe. Instead, in that moment, an icy clarity descended. My mind sharpened. I began thinking in rapid succession, my engineering brain switching on to problem-solving mode. I had a problem. My wife of 15 years, mother of our child, was sleeping with another man. How to solve it? A divorce was a given. There was no coming back from this for me. I knew my own personality well enough. Trust, once shattered, could never be rebuilt to its original strength. And frankly, I didn't want it rebuilt. If she had so little regard for me and our family as to do this, I was done. But I also knew hasty confrontations could lead to mistakes. If I exploded now, yelling and accusing, she'd deny or cry or spin some story. She might try to delete evidence, or suddenly play victim, or who knows what. And Tom, that smug son of a bitch, he'd likely close ranks to protect himself. He was an executive with a lot to lose. He'd probably lawyer up fast or pressure her to keep quiet. No. If I was going to end this, I had to do it right. Methodically. I needed proof and a plan. especially since we had a daughter to think about. I wanted custody of Emily, and I suspected Amanda would fight me tooth and nail if only out of pride or guilt. I also didn't want Amanda benefiting financially from her betrayal. I was already cataloging assets in my head: the house, our joint savings, retirement accounts, Emily's college fund. I'd be damned if I'd let her run off into the sunset with half of everything and her lover. I realized I was actually considering strategies like this barely 10 minutes after confirming the affair. A dry, mirthless laugh escaped my throat. I felt detached, as if I were observing someone else's life, analyzing it from above. The heartbreak was there somewhere deep, but it had been iced over by a driving sense of purpose. I pulled out a notebook and started listing tasks. If you saw me then, a balding man in sweatpants hunched over a desk at midnight, scribbling like a madman, you'd think I was working on some urgent office project. In a sense, I was. Project codename Payback. First, evidence gathering. I'd need concrete proof of the affair, not just for any potential legal leverage, but for my own satisfaction. I didn't want her slippery excuses. I wanted undeniable facts to slam down on the table. Phone records alone were a start, but not enough. Photos, texts, maybe video. And I wanted to know how far this had gone and for how long. Every lie she told, every time she laughed in my face by sneaking around, I wanted to know. I suspected it had been at least a few months, given the phone record cluster started about 3 months back. That lined up uncomfortably well with when she began those late nights. Second, legal counsel. I didn't know the first thing about high-stakes divorce, but I knew I'd better find someone who did, fast. A good shark of a lawyer, before she even had a chance to think. Preferably someone who could advise how to make the most of Ohio's laws regarding infidelity and asset division, if those even mattered in our no-fault state. But hey, knowledge is power. Third, protect finances and my kid. Should I quietly move half our savings to a separate account? I'd have to be careful. Any drastic moves could tip her off. Maybe freeze the home equity line if we had one. Check credit reports for any accounts she might try to open. Ensure I had copies of all important documents: tax returns, bank statements, mortgage info. I noted all these down, brain whirring. Finally, the big one: revenge, ruin, make them pay. This part I didn't list out so clearly on paper, but it throbbed in my mind with electric intensity. I wanted them both to suffer for this betrayal, not physically, though the image of beating Tom's face into a bloody pulp was pleasing. I was not about to catch an assault charge and give them the upper hand, but in every other way that mattered to them. I wanted to burn their cozy little fantasy to the ground. Images flickered in my head. Tom's wife, Cynthia, I remembered now. We had chatted about kids at that Christmas party, sobbing as she learned the truth. Tom losing his high-paying job in disgrace. Amanda's parents hearing what their perfect daughter had done and looking at her with disappointment. Our daughter learning the real reason and choosing me over her. And Amanda. I wanted her to lose everything she had deemed worth sacrificing our marriage for. I sat there in the dark for a long time, finalizing my list and steeling myself. Confrontation will come on my terms when I decide, I vowed internally. By the time I crawled into bed, sometime past 2 a.m., I felt eerily calm. I eased in beside her sleeping form, careful not to wake her. Lying on my back, I stared at the ceiling. In the dim light, I could just make out her outline. There was a time I'd have looked at her sleeping and felt a swell of love or protectiveness. Now I felt nothing, a void. Or rather, I felt something, but it wasn't love. It was a deadly, serene resolve. In that still moment, I realized I wasn't going to confront her the next morning. I wasn't going to rage or cry or demand answers. Not yet. Instead, I would play the role of the oblivious husband a little longer. I would smile, go to work, kiss her cheek, pretend everything was fine, all while assembling the tools to destroy her illusions. And once I had everything in place, I would strike so hard and fast they'd never know what hit them. Lying there in the darkness, I actually smiled. It was not a nice smile. I turned my head slightly and whispered so softly only I could hear it. "It's over. You just don't know it yet." Then I closed my eyes and let sleep come, my mind already several moves ahead, planning our ending. The next morning, I woke at 6:30 a.m. to the beeping of my alarm as usual. For a moment, I had the disorienting sensation that the revelations of the previous night had been a bad dream. Then I glanced at Amanda, who was already up and in the bathroom, blow-drying her hair for work. My heart gave a painful thump, not of love or relief, but of cold anger as reality crystallized again. I forced myself into a normal routine. Shower, shave, dress, coffee. In the kitchen, I found her packing a to-go cup of coffee for herself, dressed smartly in a navy blouse and pencil skirt. She looked beautiful, hair pulled back and a touch of makeup, the effortless professional polish she always wore to the office. A pang of bitterness hit me as I realized she was dressing up for him. I schooled my face into an easygoing expression. "Morning," I said, stifling a yawn. "Morning," she replied, busying herself with the coffee. Her eyes flicked to me, then away quickly. Was that guilt I saw? Or was I projecting? "You're out the door early," I noted as I poured myself a mug. "Big day?" She hesitated just a fraction. "Yeah, I have an 8 a.m. meeting with a new client." Her voice sounded normal, but I had learned to detect the faint tremor when she lied. She spoke just a bit too carefully. I recalled that her office usually started at 9. An 8 a.m. meeting? Perhaps, possibly. Or perhaps she was meeting him for a pre-work rendezvous somewhere. Some mornings she did leave early, claiming extra workload. "Good luck," I said casually. I stepped over and planted a light kiss on her cheek. She stiffened almost imperceptibly. The scent of her floral shampoo filled my nose. I wondered if Tom had his face buried in that hair yesterday. My jaw tightened, but I smiled as if nothing was amiss. "I'll take Emily to school, so you can get going." Relief flashed in her eyes. "Thanks, Mark," she said softly. She almost sounded sincere. Emily tromped downstairs a few minutes later, backpack slung over one shoulder. At 14, my daughter had inherited her mother's eyes and my stubborn chin. She grabbed a Pop-Tart and grumbled about an upcoming biology quiz. I did my best to act my usual self, making a corny dad joke that earned an eye roll. All the while, I watched Amanda flit around, gathering her laptop bag, avoiding lingering in the kitchen. She pecked Emily on the forehead. "Bye, sweetie. Have a great day at school. Love you," she said. To me, she gave a quick, distracted, "Have a good day," and then she was out the door. I listened for her car to pull out of the driveway. I walked to the front window under the guise of checking the weather and watched her sedan roll down the street. She was on her way, but to where exactly? That 8 a.m. client meeting had my fists clenching. As soon as she was out of sight, I went upstairs. "Em, you ready?" I called. "We gotta go in 5. "Almost," she called back from her room. I took the opportunity to slip into the master bedroom and open her closet. There on the top shelf was the shoebox where she kept old phone boxes and random electronics. Buried under a tangle of chargers was what I sought: Her old Android phone, the one she used before upgrading to her current iPhone last year. I had a hunch. Last night I'd remembered that when she switched phones, she'd briefly had both operating. If she still had the old SIM card. Bingo. It was still inside the old device. I powered the phone up. It was reset to factory defaults. She must have wiped it when she changed phones. That was fine. The SIM was what I needed. I popped it out and slipped it into a cheap prepaid phone I dug out of my own junk drawer. With any luck, her cell provider hadn't completely deactivated the SIM's data access yet. Sometimes it lingered a while on old plans. I didn't have time to check it now. I pocketed the prepaid and hurried Emily into the car. As I drove her to school, my mind churned on the next steps. After drop-off, I had an appointment I'd set late last night via email, one that I had no intention of telling anyone about. I arrived at the downtown law offices of Harper, Schmidt, and Billings at 9:30 a.m. sharp. It was one of the top family law firms in the city, known for aggressive representation. Last night, after some quick research and a couple of discreet emails, I'd managed to get a consultation with Anita Harper herself, the senior partner. By emphasizing I had an urgent situation involving a cheating spouse and a high-earning third party. Lawyers love the smell of money and conflict. I sat in the polished lobby under abstract art, feeling strangely calm while waiting. The receptionist eventually led me to a corner office with a sweeping view of the skyline. A neatly dressed woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes, greeted me with a firm handshake. "Mr. Evans? I'm Anita. Please have a seat and tell me what brings you in." Her tone was professional but not unkind. Still, it was clear she meant business. I realized this was the first time I'd said it aloud to anyone. My wife is having an affair. The matter-of-fact way the words left my mouth surprised me. There was no quaver, no hesitation. "I'm sorry to hear that," Anita said, folding her hands. "Let's discuss your situation." I gave her the broad strokes. We'd been married 15 years, one child, assets including a house, some savings, retirement accounts. I mentioned I had reason to believe my wife was cheating with a man at her workplace, noting his higher position and probable financial status as significant. I did not mention my burgeoning revenge fantasies. I kept it factual for now. Anita's questions came brisk and pointed. Did I have proof? Not yet, but I was working on it. Had I confronted my wife or hinted at suspicion? No, I was keeping it close to the vest. Any history of domestic issues that could complicate custody? No, aside from the affair, our record was squeaky clean. Stable home, devoted father, etc. Did I suspect any dissipation of marital assets on the affair? Possibly. I hadn't dug deeply yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if there were hotel bills or gifts. She nodded and took notes. Then she gave me the rundown on strategy. In Ohio, infidelity doesn't directly affect division of property since it's a no-fault state. However, evidence of misconduct could influence a judge's view on custody if it affects the child's well-being. Or it might help in negotiations by making my wife eager to settle quietly out of shame or fear of exposure. Also, if marital funds were spent on the affair, I could potentially recoup my share of those funds in the settlement. She advised me to quietly open my own bank account and secure all important documents before filing, and stressed that I should not move out of the house under any circumstances. Better to make my cheating spouse be the one to leave. I agreed wholeheartedly. I had no intention of giving up my home or advantage. After about an hour, I left Anita's office with a folder of notes and a clear set of marching orders. Collect irrefutable evidence of the affair. Don't tip off Amanda. Maintain the status quo for now. Quietly secure finances. New account, gather documents, ensure she can't suddenly empty anything. Stay in the house. If anyone was leaving, it would be her once I confronted her. Line up surveillance or a PI to get photographic proof. Sitting in my car in the parking garage, I felt grim satisfaction. This meeting had transformed my vague plans into concrete steps. I wasn't alone in this. I had an expert ready to go for the legal fight. As for the personal war, that was all mine to wage. I checked my watch. It was almost 11 a.m. Amanda would likely be at her office by now, or wherever she really was. She hadn't texted or called all morning, which wasn't unusual on a busy day. I decided to swing by my own company just to show my face. I'd taken a sick morning citing a stomach bug, but I could salvage half a day's work. Thankfully, my job as an engineering project manager had some flexibility and understanding bosses. By early afternoon, I was back home. I told my manager the stomach bug wasn't fully better and I needed to rest, which was accepted with little fuss. I had the house to myself, a perfect time to do some sleuthing. First, I took that prepaid phone with her old SIM and turned it on. As I hoped, the SIM still had basic connectivity. No meaningful data or contacts appeared. She likely wiped everything. But that was okay. I tossed the prepaid aside. There were better ways. I went to our family computer in the den. It was an iMac we all shared, though mostly it was for Emily's schoolwork and general use since both Amanda and I had work laptops. Still, I knew that at some point, Amanda had logged her iPhone's iCloud into this machine. Back when she first got the phone, she used the desktop to transfer some photos, and unless she had deliberately signed out, which she might have, but worth a check. The computer was asleep. I woke it, entered the password, and navigated to the Messages app. My gut clenched as I saw a phone number listed under the accounts. It was her iCloud ID. I clicked it. The app hesitated, asking for an updated password since it hadn't synced in months. Damn. Time to guess. I tried a couple of her usual passwords to no avail. Then I remembered she'd changed all her main passwords after a data breach last year. She had grumbled about having to come up with new ones. Perhaps our anniversary? Emily's birthday? I tried variations. No luck. Amanda was a huge Ohio State fan. We both were, alma mater and all. Maybe something like Go Bucks plus a number? I entered Go Bucks 2010, the year our daughter was born. The computer thought for a moment. Then the iCloud account icon lit up. I was in. My hands were sweating. I navigated to the synced content. Photos, mostly innocent stuff, though I noticed a gap in dates. Hardly any photos from the last few months, which likely meant she stopped auto-syncing or was deleting things. Nothing obvious there. I opened iMessages, a spinning wheel, then a whole slew of message threads appeared. Most were old or trivial chats with me, her sister, some mom friends, all dated months ago. But there it was, a thread with a number that matched Tom's, saved under TC. The sync had caught only the early portion of their chat, from when it apparently began about 7 months back. My throat tightened as I scrolled through the thread. The texts left zero doubt. Flirtatious plans for lunch that turned into hotel trysts. Coy references to shared nights on business trips. Even a suggestive selfie she sent him in new lingerie, the same set I'd found unworn in our closet. Reading my wife gush about how alive he made her feel made my vision go red. It was like a dagger to the heart, every line twisting it deeper. I had to step away from the computer and breathe slowly for a full minute, muscles taut with suppressed fury. It took every ounce of willpower not to smash something, but I kept it together. I needed this evidence intact. I snapped photos of the screen with my phone, capturing the most damning exchanges I found. These messages were a few months old, from early on in the affair, and apparently she'd wised up and stopped sinking since then. Still, they proved the sexual relationship and provided a timeline. 7 months, at least, they'd been carrying on. The business trip to Chicago I'd encouraged her to attend, they'd turned it into a romantic getaway. The texts even mentioned meeting at our house once or twice during a long lunch break, which made me grit my teeth. I hadn't realized she'd been that bold screwing him under our roof, in my bed no less. So the affair had been going on a long while, and they'd only gotten more cautious, likely using other apps or burner emails now. I searched her email next. Her personal Gmail was open in the browser. Nothing obvious in the inbox, but in the trash folder I found fragments of confirmation emails from a Rosewood Inn and a budget host motel, deleted itineraries that she probably thought were gone for good. I also spotted a recurring personal email address that wasn't in her contacts, something random like love2smile73 at. Some of her sent messages had this address on BCC. I opened one thread with the subject Q3 Budget Review and found nothing about budgets at all. It was a message to that private email with the line, "Let's meet at the usual spot around noon. I need a long lunch." The reply from the mysterious address, "Can't wait, I'll bring dessert." Clever. They were using innocuous work-related subject lines as code. I forwarded a few of these to a new secure email I'd created purely to collect evidence, then permanently deleted the forwards from her sent folder. If she noticed, she'd probably assume the threads auto-purged. I was gathering plenty of digital proof, but nothing beats catching them in person. For that, I needed to track their movements. I had an idea where to start. Her car. Our Toyota had a built-in navigation system that could show recent destinations. Sure enough, when I checked the history, I saw an address that popped up repeatedly over the last few months. A Red Roof Inn out in Grove City, not far from her office. The latest entry was just last week at 12:17 p.m., which matched a day she'd claimed to be at work through lunch. My hands trembled as I snapped a photo of the screen. She was using lunch hours and likely flex time to meet him at a cheap motel. By the time I closed the trunk of her car, I had more than enough circumstantial evidence. But I wanted undeniable photographic proof, both for myself and for any confrontation. If it came down to a divorce battle, nothing ends arguments faster than a picture of your spouse locking lips with their lover. For that, I decided to call in professional help. Anita had given me a PI recommendation, a guy named Henry, ex-law enforcement, supposedly very discreet. I gave him a call that afternoon and set up a plan. I'd already done the legwork of identifying their likely meet-up spots and general schedule. He sounded mildly impressed by that. I told him to do whatever it took to get clear photos of them together, ideally at the motel or someplace undeniable. Over the next several days, I continued my quiet preparations. I went into work and acted as normal as possible, though inside I was coiled with tension. In the evenings, I played the pleasant husband, chatting superficially with Amanda about trivial things. She seemed relieved I wasn't pressing her for intimacy or details of her day. Perhaps she thought our marriage was just comfortably cooling into distance. Little did she know. Our daughter noticed the tension, though. One night, while Amanda was working late again, Emily and I had dinner alone, take-out Thai, as I had no heart to cook. Emily, sharp as ever, asked, "Is Mom okay? She's been gone a lot." I forced a smile. "She's just busy with work, honey. Big campaigns." I hated lying to her, but I wasn't ready to blow this up just yet. Emily frowned. "She barely talks to us anymore." She poked at her pad thai. Did you guys have a fight or something? I gently shook my head. No fight. Sometimes adults just get stressed. But don't worry, kiddo. I reached over to squeeze her hand. I've got an eye on things. You just focus on school and being your awesome self, okay? She looked unconvinced, but nodded slowly. Okay, but Dad, you'd tell me if something was really wrong, right? That almost cracked my composure. My sweet girl. She didn't deserve the upheaval that was coming. I promise, I said, managing to keep my voice steady. I'll always tell you the truth when I can. Just give it a little time. She accepted that, and thankfully changed the subject to a funny meme her friend sent. As I cleared the table later, I silently vowed that no matter how brutally I handled her mother and that bastard Tom, I'd do everything possible to shield Emily and make sure she ended up with me safe and loved. By the end of that week, the PI delivered exactly what I needed: a series of crystal-clear photos of Amanda and Tom meeting at motels, kissing in broad daylight, even sneaking out of a room together. Time-stamped, indisputable evidence. I scanned and backed up everything. Combined with the texts, emails, and phone logs I'd gathered, I had an ironclad dossier of her infidelity, more than enough to blow her world apart. And blow it apart I would, very soon. But I wasn't quite done yet. I had something special in mind for the moment of confrontation. A way to scare the living daylights out of them without laying a finger on either. I spent a few late nights in the garage workshop tinkering, testing. Among my many half-finished projects, I dug out an old set of high-quality speakers and an amp. Years ago, I dabbled in music recording as a hobby and still had some gear. Now I repurposed it for a different kind of performance. I recorded myself screaming, shouting the nastiest, most unhinged threats I could imagine, unleashing real rage. Listening back to the playback actually made the hair on my neck rise. In that audio, I sounded deranged and bloodthirsty. Perfect. I even layered in sound effects of a shotgun cocking, firing, and wood splintering. The final 30-second audio track sounded terrifyingly real. Using a remote-controlled outlet and an old smartphone hooked to the speakers, I rigged it so I could trigger the recording to blast at full volume in the house while I remained safely out of view. In a test while the house was empty, the effect was bone-chilling. It would do nicely. Now timing. I needed them together in our house. Normally they met at motels or occasionally at the office after hours. But an opportunity was coming up. Emily had an overnight school trip on a weekend in mid-October, leaving early Saturday, back Sunday afternoon. The moment that trip was scheduled, I had seen a gleam in Amanda's eye. I suspected she and Tom might use the chance to have their own getaway. Sure enough, about a week before the trip, Amanda casually mentioned she might do a girls' spa day with a friend on that Saturday since I'd be bored at home alone. I played my part, telling her that actually I was thinking of going to Cleveland to catch a baseball game with my buddy Pete that weekend, maybe crash at his place. Her eyes practically sparkled with relief, though she tried to hide it. "Oh, that's great," she said, smiling. "You deserve a fun outing, and I won't feel guilty going to the spa if I know you're having a good time too." It was almost comical, how easily she thought she had cleared the house of both husband and child for her tryst. We were like two people smiling politely, each hiding a secret. The difference was, I knew her secret, and she had no clue about mine. When the day came, I packed a small overnight bag and gave Amanda a goodbye peck, as if heading off for my bro weekend. "Have fun at the spa," I said with a grin that probably looked more genuine than any expression I'd given her in months. "Don't get too crazy with those mud masks." She chuckled, seemingly at ease. "I'll try to behave. Love you," she added out of habit. The words rang hollow to my ears, but I just nodded and left. I didn't go far. I parked at a big grocery store about a mile away and waited. Through the PI's intel and my own tracking, I knew her lover's car, a silver BMW, and I was certain he'd show up at my house within an hour or two of my departure. Sure enough, a little before noon, I got a silent ping on the GPS tracker I'd stashed in the hedges by our driveway. A car had arrived. I drove carefully back into the neighborhood and parked on a side street behind an empty house for sale, out of view. Through a gap between houses, I could see my driveway, now occupied by a silver BMW. It boiled my blood to see it there, but I swallowed the anger. Patience. I slipped into the backyard of the vacant house I'd parked near, making my way to the fence line that backed up to my property. There was a small stand of trees providing cover. From there, I had a decent view of the back of my house and yard. As expected, all the curtains were drawn shut. They weren't taking chances of prying eyes now, but I had eyes inside. I pulled out my phone and opened the app linked to the hidden cameras I'd planted. One was in the living room, tucked among books on a high shelf aimed at the couch. The other was in the bedroom, positioned up on the wardrobe looking down at the bed. Both had motion sensors. The living room feed connected first. It showed them clearly. Amanda straddling Tom on our sofa, kissing him deeply. Clothes were already strewn on the floor. They hadn't wasted any time. I clenched my jaw, but forced myself to focus on the plan. The camera had no audio. Better to avoid a noticeable red blinking light, so I couldn't hear their voices, but I didn't need to. Their bodies told the story. I saw enough to confirm they were well into their routine. With a few taps, I switched to the bedroom camera feed and set an alert for motion. They'd head there soon, I assumed. In the meantime, I carefully moved closer, creeping along the fence to nearer the back porch. After about 40 minutes, a notification told me they'd moved to the bedroom. The hidden camera feed confirmed it. Tangled limbs on my bed. I caught a flash of my wife's bare back and his hands on her and had to look away, fury pulsing through me. It was time. I retreated a safe distance behind the neighbor's garage, where I had stashed a clear view of my front yard as well. Taking a deep breath, I pulled up the remote control app on my phone, the one linked to the outlet powering the speakers in our bedroom. My custom audio file was queued and ready. My heart hammered against my ribs as I hit the on switch for the outlet and cranked my phone volume to max to transmit the audio. Even from outside, I heard the sudden boom of the shotgun blast sound effect erupt inside my house. It was immediately followed by my own recorded voice bellowing at full volume. "You goddamn cheating slut!" Another blam echoed. I'd timed it to sound like a second shot racking and firing. Then my voice roared, dripping with manic fury. "I'll kill you both! Tom, you piece of shit! I'm gonna blow your balls off!" I couldn't make out their screams from outside, but through the closed windows I heard frantic thuds and muffled shrieks. The camera alert on my phone showed chaotic movement in the bedroom feed, the two of them scrambling naked off the bed in sheer terror. I imagined their faces, half-dressed, convinced that an enraged, shotgun-wielding husband was about to blast through the door. It was all I could do to keep from laughing out loud. On the recording, I had spliced in a final shotgun blast and one more blood-curdling scream from me. "I'm coming for you! You're dead!" Then I tapped to cut the power. Silence. The whole onslaught lasted maybe 20 or 30 seconds, but the effect was immediate. From my vantage point, I saw the front door of my house burst open. Tom came bolting out into the daylight, wearing nothing but an unbuttoned shirt and one sock. His face was pure panic. He didn't even attempt to find his shoes or fully dress. He just ran. I raised my phone and snapped a photo as he sprinted shirtless down the street, pants clutched in one hand, looking for all the world like a lunatic escaping an asylum. He disappeared around the corner, apparently deciding that getting the hell out of the neighborhood on foot was safer than taking the time to reach his car. He'd left it a block over, I later discovered, to be discreet. Fat lot of good that did him. Moments later, Amanda stumbled out the front door. She had managed to yank on a terrycloth bathrobe and was barefoot, hair disheveled, eyes wild. She spun her head frantically, as if expecting me to emerge from behind a bush with a shotgun any second. She didn't see me. Instead, she staggered onto the lawn in a daze, eyes wild and terrified, yelling my name into the empty air. I stayed carefully out of sight, relishing her desperation. Things were going even better than expected. Her lover was gone, her nerves were shattered, and she was utterly petrified. I watched her fumble with her phone, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Within minutes, I heard sirens in the distance. Either she or a neighbor had called 911. Good. The more public this scene became, the better. I slipped back into the wooded cut-through behind the houses and circled around to where I'd left my car. Then I casually walked toward the cluster of neighbors gathering at the end of the block to see what the commotion was. Blending into a small crowd, I watched the spectacle from a safe distance. 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of my house. Amanda ran toward them, sobbing and screaming hysterically. I couldn't make out all her words from where I stood, but I caught snippets. My husband tried to shoot us. He went crazy. She was pointing at our house and at the street, probably indicating the way Tom had run, though she didn't mention who he was, I bet. Several neighbors looked on from their porches or yards with expressions of shock and concern. One of my across-the-street neighbors, an elderly retiree named Carl, whispered to another, "I never knew Mark had it in him." I hid a smirk. Rumors were already swirling that mild-mannered Mark Evans just tried to murder his wife and some guy. Perfect. The police, guns drawn, did a sweep through my house and yard. Of course, they found no shooter, no shotgun, and no evidence of a break-in or actual gunfire. No shell casings, no damage, nothing. I'd made sure of that. I saw the officers exchange confused looks. Amanda was frantically insisting that I had been there and fired a gun. They took her statement while another officer canvassed bystanders. When he reached our little huddle, I kept my head low under my baseball cap and pretended to be just another rubbernecker. Nobody pointed me out. In the chaos, no one realized I was the Mark they were all gossiping about. After a tense half-hour, the police officer's demeanor shifted from high alert to mildly exasperated. With no evidence of a shooting and an increasingly incoherent story from my wife, she was by then babbling about hidden speakers and ghost gunshots, which made her sound crazy. They eventually left, suggesting that she stay elsewhere for the night and contact me by phone. They probably figured it was some kind of domestic dispute with a scare, but without concrete proof of a crime, there wasn't much they could do except file a report. The neighbors gradually dispersed once the cruisers drove off. Amanda stood there on the lawn, alone and shaking. I watched her from half a block away, concealed by a hedge for a long moment. She looked small and pitiful in her robe and slippers, her face streaked with tears and confusion. For just an instant, I felt a twinge of something, not quite remorse, but the gravity of what I'd done. I had utterly shattered her sense of security and reality in a few minutes of carefully engineered mayhem. But then I remembered the images of her tangled up with Tom on my bed, and any pity I felt evaporated. This was the bed she'd made. Now she could lie in it, alone. I slipped back to my car and drove off unseen. I had more work to do from a safe distance. That evening, I made two important phone calls. First, I called the police non-emergency line from a motel 2 towns over, where I'd checked in to establish an alibi. I calmly explained that I'd been out of town all day and just heard from my distraught wife that something had happened at our home. The officer I spoke with sounded a bit skeptical but confirmed no one had been hurt, and it might have been a false alarm or prank. I told him I'd cut my trip short and come to the station the next day to clear things up. He said that was fine. It was clear they weren't treating it as an active crime, probably chalked it up to a marital spat or mental breakdown on her part. My second call was to my lawyer, Anita. I relayed in concise detail that I had evidence in hand and an incident had occurred, which left my wife extremely rattled. Anita didn't need the full story. I suspect she knew better than to ask. She just told me she'd have the divorce petition ready to file first thing Monday, and we arranged for a process server to be on standby. I spent that night at the motel, finally allowing myself a deep, long sleep. For the first time in months, I felt truly relaxed. Odd, considering what had just transpired. But that's how I knew I had crossed a threshold. The old chapter of my life had closed, and I'd come out on top. Now it was time to finish the job. Monday morning, Amanda was served with divorce papers at 8 a.m. sharp, right at home, since she wasn't about to go into work after the weekend's chaos. I heard later from a friend that she'd taken a personal leave. Small wonder. I'm sure she was still jumpy as a rabbit, waiting for me to jump out of a bush. But I had no intention of ever laying a hand on her. My revenge was already in motion, rolling downhill unstoppably. Using an automated email timer I'd set up, I sent off my carefully curated evidence packet to several key recipients: her parents, a few of our close mutual friends, and, most devastating for her and Tom, the HR department and higher-ups at their company. I kept the email factual and civil, stating that I was divorcing Amanda due to her documented infidelity with Tom, and attaching a few choice photos and excerpts of texts as proof. I didn't rant or call names. I let the evidence speak for itself. The workplace fallout was immediate and severe. By midday Monday, I got a brief text from Amanda, through our lawyers, begging me to stop ruining Tom's life by contacting his job. It was almost laughable. Did she really think I'd have sympathy? I ignored the message. Through a former colleague of hers, I learned that management had forced Tom to resign by the end of that week, and Amanda was also let go under the guise of violating company policy. Apparently, neither of them could show their faces at the office again. Their sordid affair had made the rounds, and they slunk away in disgrace. The social repercussions hit her just as hard. Her parents, whom I'd always had a good relationship with, were mortified and furious with her. Her mother called me in tears to apologize on her behalf, and her father left her a voicemail, which she later told me about, essentially disowning her until she sorted out this mess. Many of our friends reached out to express support for me. Some of her closer girlfriends went radio silent, unsure what to say in the face of such revelations. She found herself isolated, the cheater in a tight-knit community where loyalty was thin for adulterers. Of everyone, though, the person whose reaction mattered most was Emily. I insisted to Amanda that I be the one to tell our daughter the truth, in an age-appropriate way. So the evening after serving the papers, I picked Emily up from her friend's house, where she'd wisely retreated during the turmoil, and took her for a drive. We parked in an empty lot, milkshakes in hand, and I gently explained that her mother had been unfaithful to me and that we would be getting a divorce. I braced for tears or anger. Instead, Emily gave a small, sad nod and said, "I'm not surprised, Dad. I saw some clues, and Mom hasn't exactly been around much." Her voice wavered, and then her composure cracked, and she sobbed in my arms, mourning the loss of our family as she'd known it. I held her, my own eyes wet, apologizing to her that she had to go through this. Through her tears, she told me she loved me and that she wanted to stay with me. It was more relief and validation than I deserved, honestly. In that moment, I realized that while I had set out to utterly destroy my wife's world, I still had to hold together something even more important: my daughters. In the weeks that followed, Amanda was served with divorce papers. Initially, she blustered and tried to salvage some pride, but faced with my overwhelming evidence and my clear advantage in any custody fight, she capitulated quickly. The settlement was completely in my favor. I kept the house and the lion's share of our assets, and she waived any claim to alimony out of guilt and recognition she wouldn't get it. Most importantly, I received full custody of Emily, with only limited visitation granted to Amanda. Our daughter didn't even want to see her mother at first. In time, I encouraged Emily to maintain some relationship for her own sake, but Amanda had to work hard to earn even a fragment of trust from her again. By the time the ink was dry on our divorce, about 4 months after D-Day, Amanda had nothing left of the life she once knew. No husband, very little money, she ended up dipping into her retirement early just to afford a small apartment. A tarnished reputation, and a strained relationship with the only child who mattered to her. Tom fared no better. His wife divorced him immediately, taking the kids and a good chunk of his assets. He lost his high-paying job and, last I heard, moved 3 states away to some mediocre position far beneath what he'd had. He was a pariah in our town after word spread of what he'd done. As for me, I'd be lying if I said it was easy or fun to rebuild after all that. But it was infinitely better than remaining the clueless, disrespected fool they'd made me out to be. I sold the old house, too many memories, and moved to a smaller place across town. Emily settled in with me, and over time she healed. We both did. We even got back to cracking jokes at the dinner table eventually. She's a resilient kid. One evening, about a year after the dust settled, I was sitting on the back porch of my new home, sipping a beer and watching the sun set. Emily was at a friend's, and the evening was peaceful. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was from Amanda. She wrote that she was sorry for everything, that losing us was the biggest mistake of her life, and she wakes up every day wishing she could undo it. She said she hoped I could someday find it in my heart to forgive her, but she understood if I never spoke to her again beyond what was necessary for Emily. It was a long, emotional message, clearly written after a lot of drafts or a lot of wine. I deleted it without replying. Forgiveness? Not in this lifetime. Civility for the sake of co-parenting, sure. We were already doing that via a court-monitored messaging app. But true forgiveness or friendship? She burned that bridge to ashes. Before I headed inside, I opened the gallery on my phone, scrolling to a folder I kept private. In it was a collection of photos and screenshots, the receipts of her affair and my revenge. I rarely looked at them now, but sometimes I did. As a reminder, the one I chose to view that night was a photo the PI had taken of Amanda and Tom in the motel parking lot, locked in an embrace, utterly oblivious to the camera and the wrecking ball heading for their lives. I remember when that picture would have made me rage or cry. Now it just elicited a grim sense of justice. They had gambled our family for their thrills. They thought I was blind, that I'd never fight back. They were wrong. In the end, I won. completely, and I've never lost a night's sleep over how I achieved it.